Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Laura.
Before we jump in, if you like what you're hearing, we would love if you would rate Crime Clueless on Apple or Spotify, leave a review on Audible, and hit subscribe on YouTube. It helps more listeners find the show, and we love you for it. Close your eyes for a second and picture this. It's the last week of June. School just let out. The air is already thick and warm by 9 in the morning. And the whole summer is stretched out ahead of you like it's never going to end. You're 16. You just got your first real job, lifeguarding at the town pond. Not a pool with a manager and a break room. It's a pond, the kind with a roped-off swim area, a little sandy beach, and trees pressing in close on every side. The kind of place where your mom drops you off, you wave goodbye through the windshield and walk towards the water and your lifeguard chair. That's what happened on the morning of June 27th, 2000 in Warren, Massachusetts. A town of about 5,000 people in the middle of the state where everybody knows everybody, where the biggest thing going on in the summer is who's going to the pond. Molly Bish was 16 years old, and this was only her second day on the job. Her mom, Maggie, pulled into the Comins Pond parking lot that morning, just like she had the day before. She watched Molly grab her things, her flip-flops, her first aid kit, a towel, and head towards the water, and then she drove away. When people arrived at the pond that morning, only about 15 minutes later, the lifeguard chair was empty. Her belongings were still by the water's edge, right where she'd set them down. She just wasn't there anymore. Today, we're going to talk about what happened to Molly Bish. Molly Ann Bish was born in Detroit, Michigan. She was the youngest of 3 kids, her older sister Heather and her older brother John Jr. When Molly was about a year old, the family experienced a violent incident in their neighborhood. An 18-year-old woman was followed home from work, abducted, and assaulted right where they lived. And that was it for Maggie and John. They packed up and they moved the family to John's hometown, Warren, Massachusetts.
So they were trying to leave the big city, it seems like, to get somewhere safer. Was that their plan?
Yeah, exactly. And to them, Warren was that place. It was a population of 4,800, the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked, where kids rode their bikes everywhere, where parents didn't think twice about letting them run around unsupervised. It was one of those last pockets of small town America where you just didn't have to worry. The Bish family settled in and they thrived there. By the summer of 2000, Heather and John Jr. had both gone off to college. Molly had just finished her junior year of high school. She was 16. Her dad described her as being heavily involved with school, sports, friends. She had a boyfriend named Steven, and they'd only been dating for about 3 months. They had just gone to prom together. She was a normal kid having a normal summer. And she had just landed that job, and she was really proud of it. She was excited to be lifeguarding at Comins Pond. That's a picture of it for you.
Was this her first job then?
Yeah, it was her first real job, right? So not babysitting or odd jobs. It was an actual position with responsibility. And she took it really seriously. Now, Comins Pond is this small recreational area right in the central part of Warren. It has a little sandy beach, a roped-off area for swimming. They did swim lessons there. It's really pretty, and we'll post a picture. But it's also isolated. Maggie described it as being surrounded by woods on almost every side. So peaceful. It feels perfectly safe on a sunny morning with families around. But if you caught it empty and quiet, you would notice how close the tree line is. And that's important to keep in the back of your mind because on the morning this happened, Molly at first was there alone.
So no one else was at the pond yet when she got there?
She was the first one there. And really, she wasn't that early. Swim lessons started pretty quick. So she wasn't going to be there alone for very long. Her mom dropped her off, watched her walk towards the water, and then drove away. And what I keep coming back to is this. The Bish family left Detroit because of what happened to a young woman in their neighborhood. They moved to Warren specifically because it was safe. They spent 15 years building a life in a place where they believed nothing like that could ever reach them. And Heather, Molly's sister, said it best. She said, "We were all just small town people. We all knew each other. We never imagined something like this could happen to Molly. And it really changed the framework of our lives."
That's really sad.
It's really sad. There's a lot of cases where they make a decision because it's safer. They send them to this college because it's safer than a different one.
Yeah.
And it always breaks my heart.
It's just doesn't turn out that way.
Right. June 26th, 2000, the day before Molly disappeared, and this was her first day on the job. Some reporting says that it was more like her 6th or 7th day. I think they're talking about her doing the whole lifeguarding class the week before and getting certified and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But just to put that out there, the differences in reporting. Maggie drives Molly to the pool that morning, pulls into the parking lot, and something catches her attention. There's a man sitting in a white sedan. He's parked there alone. He's not getting out of his car. He's not unloading a cooler or heading to the beach. He's just sitting there, and he's looking towards the pond. Maggie described him as a middle-aged man, heavyset with a mustache and a dark complexion. And she said something about him just felt wrong. And it wasn't one specific thing that she could point to. It was a feeling, that gut-level awareness that something is off. She'd waited nearly 20 minutes watching him before he finally drove off.
Did she say anything to Molly that day?
She didn't, and I think that's one of the details in this case that people fixate on. So to be really careful with it, especially because Maggie has talked about how she's carried that moment for 25 years. But think about the reality of what actually happened. I mean, she saw a man at a public pond sitting in a car on a summer morning, and that's it. That's all it was. There's nothing to report, no crime, no threat, just a weird feeling. And how many times have all of us had that feeling and nothing has happened? How many times have you been in a parking lot or a grocery store and someone just gave you a weird vibe and then you move on with your day?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I mean, things like that happen all the time. You see things that just look off, but some people, people are allowed to go to the pond and sit there. And it's probably hindsight too. You're like, oh, I had noticed that the day before and that was really weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing weird was happening. Nothing happened that day. So even though she had that weird feeling, that day was fine.
Exactly.
It's easy to say in hindsight, why didn't you do something about it?
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? Exactly. You can't report it to the police. There's a weird guy at the pond sitting in his car.
Right.
But
exactly.
I mean, it happens all the time. You get just that weird feeling or you notice something. But I mean, in the end, it's like I said, it's easier to make a deal out of something in hindsight when something did happen.
Oh, absolutely.
If nothing had happened for 2 months, she probably would have forgot about that guy in the car.
Right.
Probably because it was the next day and what happened. More in hindsight, oh, this was really odd.
Exactly. In hindsight is exactly it. Because in real time, like you said, when nothing happens, it's just kind of that weird thing that you notice in the moment. Maggie dropped Molly off. Molly went to work. The day was fine. Nothing happened. Molly came home safe. And here's what makes this detail so important to the investigation. Maggie remembered him. She remembered the car. She remembered his face. Now, the next morning, June 27th, when she pulled into the parking lot to drop Molly off for day 2, she did look around for him.
And he wasn't there this day?
Nope, she didn't see him. Parking lot was empty, so she felt better about that. But
had she seen him the week before, like when she was doing training, did she notice? And maybe that's why she noticed him again the last, on the 26th when she saw him?
I didn't see it anywhere that she'd ever noticed him sitting there before. Training wasn't at the pond, though. It was at like a public swimming pool type place.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Now, even though Maggie didn't see him that second morning, investigators do believe that someone was watching that pond, that someone knew a 16-year-old girl would be there alone early before anyone else arrived. Someone who may have been in the parking lot the day before doing exactly what Maggie thought he was doing, learning the routine. On Tuesday, June 27th, 2000, was a clear summer morning in Warren, Massachusetts. And it was Holly Bish's 8th day on the job as a lifeguard at Comins Pond, a job she'd inherited from her older brother, John, who'd worked the same post for 3 summers before her. It was a little bit of a rough morning. A school friend of Molly's had been hit by a car early in the morning and was in critical condition. Feeling a little down, but still wanting to be responsible and go to her job, Molly and her mom had stopped by a convenience store to grab some water bottles. This is captured on security cameras at the Extra Mart on Main Street. They caught Molly walking up to the counter. The timestamp read 9:52 a.m. She left the store, and notably, it was Molly who got behind the wheel of the family's silver station wagon with her mother, Maggie, riding in the passenger seat. They made a quick stop at the police station to pick up Molly's 2-way radio. This pond didn't have any telephone or any type of communication. The radio was the only way that lifeguards could contact police or any emergency services. So they had to stop and pick that up, and I think they had to turn it back in at the end of the day. And then they drove the half-mile up the road to Comins Pond. They pulled in just before 10 a.m. A highway truck was there ahead of them, pouring a fresh load of sand onto the beach for the day's swim lessons. There's no white sedan. Maggie and Molly sat there for a few minutes watching, talking about the swim lessons that were about to start. That gave Maggie some relief, but it wasn't quite as clean a picture as it seemed. A sand truck driver later told investigators he'd seen a similar white car in that same lot only moments before Maggie and Molly arrived. If that's accurate, the car had been there and gone within minutes of their arrival. Not absent all morning, just absent at the exact moment that they got to the pond. Other witnesses reported a white car elsewhere in the area that same morning too. One near a car wash at the head of Comins Pond Road, and another spotted by a cemetery groundskeeper on the far side of the pond where a wooded trail connects directly back to the beach. 5 minutes later, Molly got out carrying her backpack, her water bottle, towel, the police radio. "Bye, Mom. I love you," Molly said. "Bye, honey," Maggie responded. Everything feels normal. Maggie watches her walk away, and then she drives home. And that's the last time that Maggie Bish ever sees her daughter.
Oh, it's awful. How long was it before someone realized that she was gone?
Minutes. We're talking about a window of maybe 13 to 15 minutes between when Maggie pulled out of the parking lot and when the first people showed up for swim lessons. And that's it. That's the entire window in which whatever happened to Molly happened. Around 10:15 that morning, people started arriving. And when they get there, the lifeguard chair is empty. Her belongings, though, her flip-flops, her first aid kit, they're sitting at the water's edge right by her lifeguard chair, right where she would have set them down when she got there. But Molly is not there. And interestingly, the first aid kit is open, like she had needed to use it or to help someone. And as a total complete aside, we don't know why the first aid kit is open. We don't know if she needed it or if someone asked her for help. But I want you to know this is your cue to tell your nieces and nephews, your friends' kids, your grandkids, anyone in your life. Adults don't need help from kids, ever. They can call 911. They can suggest this other adult, find another adult. But adults don't need help from kids. And again, I don't know if that's why her first aid kit is open, but it's happened before where adults use this as a ploy to get kids because they're trained to be nice, they're trained to be kind, they're trained to help. But in this kind of situation, they need to know that they don't need to help. They can find another adult to help. It's not their job to help because on that one off chance that this person doesn't actually need help, it's a ploy, they need to know that. The first aid kit being open hurts my heart because I feel like she possibly thought this other person needed help and he used that against her. And it's despicable, but it happens. So we need to teach them it's not your job to help another adult. Okay, back to it. We know there's no note. We know she didn't call anyone. There's no sign that she walked away on her own. Parents that were there that morning didn't know Molly very well, right? She's new to the job, and their first thought, it sounds like, is that she had just decided to blow off work that day. And, she would never do that, but they don't really know. Maybe she got sick and, the first people are like, okay, well, we'll stay here. And then it wasn't for quite a while, almost until it was 11:44 that they had alerted her boss and then they alerted police. So
Did they think it was odd though that like her towel and shoes were there? Because why would those be there if she was like blowing off work or something?
that was my thought too. And the only thing that I could see, like in quotes in the old newspaper reports on this, they thought maybe she had gone into the woods with friends. Maybe they had showed up and they had gone on a walk and then had just decided not to come back. To me, though, seeing all of her stuff there and her not there, I feel like it would raise alarm bells, like you said, right
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense if you were saying that they thought she walked off with her friends into the
Yeah.
woods. Why?
Right. They did notice a stretch of broken branches along the tree line at the edge of the woods near the pond.
Was it more of like they were broken like a struggle, or would it happen like that if kids were just walking through there?
I don't think so. And I don't know if the people who were just showing up just kind of noticed that it looked slightly different. But when investigators got there, they thought it looked like signs of a struggle, that something had happened in those woods or at least on the edge of them. And they thought whatever happened must have happened fast enough that no one heard anything, no commotion, no one driving by on the road saw anything. Now, this is a detail that didn't show up anywhere except the original newspaper coverage, specifically in the Republic and some of the other newspapers in the area. It's not in any retrospective true crime write-ups that I saw. Worcester County District Attorney John Conte, who led the investigation, later put the window at less than 10 minutes from drop-off to disappearance, which honestly is terrifying. And according to him, screams were heard at the pond that morning. But there was no blood, no hair, no torn clothing, no sign of a struggle anywhere at the scene. He later said it was a mystery even for us. The lack of forensic evidence gives you a clue to a certain point because that's so unusual. A scream and then nothing left behind to explain it. It's just so awful that in a window of minutes, this 16-year-old girl was taken from a public beach and was just gone.
Oh, it's just so sad and so fast. It kind of made me wonder if someone had been in the woods once she got to her chair, they came out and asked for help. And she went to open the first aid kit and then they took her.
Yeah.
That would make sense if they were waiting for her mom to leave and then came running out like, oh, someone got hurt. And she gets distracted opening her stuff and then they could take her.
They grab her. And they might have noticed Maggie looking at them the day before. Yeah. So decided, like you said, to be in the woods instead of parked there a second day in a row. Like
Yeah.
maybe that's too obvious today.
Yeah.
When her boss found out that she wasn't there, he called police to report her missing. And police, for an hour or so, thought she might have just decided to blow off work. They knew that this girl that she played sports with had been hit by a car that morning. They thought maybe she just needed a minute. But thankfully, they didn't think that for very long. At 1 p.m., they called her mom to say she wasn't at work. And when Maggie got that phone call, she knew. She said she knew immediately. She knew that Molly would never leave her post. She knew how seriously Molly was taking her new job. She wouldn't have walked off. She wouldn't have left her things sitting on the beach and just disappeared. That was not who Molly was. Now, Warren is a small town and word traveled fast. Law enforcement responded in a way after that one little hour that matched how alarming this was. What followed was the largest missing person search in the history of Massachusetts. We're talking state police, local departments, search teams from all over. They searched the woods around the pond. They searched the roads, the fields, the waterways. They brought in dogs. They brought in helicopters. Volunteers came from everywhere. And they spent a really long time searching the pond too, wondering if she had decided to go for a swim and something happened. They had divers searching all the rest that day until it got dark and the whole next day. Despite all of this, they found nothing. No trace of Molly, no clothing, no blood, no evidence of a vehicle beyond what Maggie had already told them, the white sedan she'd seen the day before with the man sitting in it. That's all they had.
That's really terrifying because really that means whoever did this didn't leave anything behind.
No.
You know, was Maggie
Exactly.
able to describe that man to police? Did
She
they
was.
recognize him?
Not that I could find. Nothing at this scene, though, tells you something. Whether it tells you this person had done this before, or whether it tells you they had planned it carefully, or whether they just got lucky, something about the way Molly was taken was clean, like disturbingly clean. And in a town with only 4,800 people in broad daylight, that morning when people are showing up 15 minutes later, it is too clean that no one saw anything.
Especially to take her through the woods and have broken branches. Obviously, they're walking through somewhere to not have any trace of blood or ripped clothes or anything like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, investigators are working a missing person case with almost no physical evidence at the scene. They couldn't even find drag marks conclusive enough to follow. No witness who saw Molly being taken. All they have is Maggie's description from the day before. Maggie gave investigators really their first solid lead. She did remember that man's face. She sat down with police. She gave them a detailed description. He was middle-aged, heavy-set, mustache, dark complexion, in a white sedan. And from that description, they built a composite sketch. The sketch went everywhere. It was on wanted posters plastered all over New England. It was on the news. It was in newspapers, on flyers, on community boards. And tips did start pouring in. People calling in saying they recognized the man, saying they'd seen someone matching that description, saying they knew someone who drove a white car.
How many tips are we talking about here? Sounds like quite a lot.
It was a lot. Over the course of the investigation, it was more than 6,700.
Oh, wow.
This case got a lot of attention, and that sketch was haunting. People looked at that face and they saw someone they knew. The problem was a lot of people saw someone they knew.
And it is kind of a general description, kind of vague middle-aged guy with a mustache.
Exactly.
Kind of vague description, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's the double-edged sword of it. The description was specific enough to create a sketch. Maggie was confident in what she saw, but like you said, it's generic, heavy-set, middle-aged man in rural New England in the year 2000. it could be a lot of people. Investigators started bringing in men who resembled the sketch for questioning. They later created a second, more refined version that was more lifelike, more detailed, but it was still such a wide net. And in
And
the
even the car, like a white sedan, that's got
exactly.
to be like one of the most popular cars.
Mhm.
So vague to, I'm sure everyone knows someone who could match that description who drives
Yeah,
a white car. Like,
exactly.
we don't have a make or model or anything like that, right?
Not that I've seen. Ah, very general. In the meantime, they were doing what investigators always do. They looked at the people closest to Molly. They looked at family members, friends, anyone in her immediate circle. They kind of started with Molly's boyfriend. His name was Stephen. They'd only been dating about 3 months. When police talked to him after Molly disappeared, he had a fat lip and scratches on him. So
Oh,
that raised some red flags. But here's the thing, the Bish family never believed Stephen was involved, not for a second. And investigators looked at it and asked a pretty practical question. Could a teenager pull off a crime like this in that short of a window, that cleanly, and leave absolutely nothing behind? The answer they kept coming back to was no. It didn't feel like something a 16-year-old kid did. This felt like something someone with experience had done. Within 24 hours, authorities had shifted their focus to known sex offenders in the area. And that's where the investigation would stay for a very long time, cycling through men who matched the description, men with records, men with connections to the area, lead after lead after lead.
and none of that went anywhere either.
Not in any way that brought Molly home. Within just weeks of Molly's disappearance, Warren's 100-year-old town hall had been converted into a command center for what was becoming one of the largest missing persons investigations in all of Massachusetts history. Detectives covered the walls. They had composite sketches, a photograph of someone modeling a swimsuit like the one Molly wore, a hand-lettered sign reading, quote, polygraph test in progress. On another wall, a poster tracked 13 separate suspects, each one's whereabouts in the 12 hours before and after Molly vanished, laid out in colored boxes along a timeline. At the investigation's peak, 30 state police detectives were assigned to the case. By the 10-month mark, that number had been cut down to 6 or 8. More than $385,000 had already been spent on detective payroll alone. $315,000 of that in overtime. Thousands of tips poured in, and also thousands of letters arrived for Molly's family. For context on just how urgent those opening hours were, a 1997 study by the Washington State Attorney General's office, looking at 600 child abduction cases nationwide, found that in 74% of abductions that ended in murder, the victim was already dead within 3 hours. Again, 6,700 tips, years of work, and after years, no arrest, no charges, no Molly. Now, for 3 years, the Bish family lived in that in-between space, the space where your daughter is missing, but they haven't found her. So technically, you don't know,
Yeah.
even though you might feel like you know. You sit by the phone, you show up to every vigil, you put her face on every poster you can, and you wait. And they did that for 3 years. And the whole time, Molly's mom is walking around with the face of this man she saw in the parking lot burned into her memory, knowing she saw him and knowing that no one has found him. Let's talk about what those 3 years actually looked like for this family and this community, because while it might be easy to say her remains were found 3 years later, like it's just part of the timeline, those 3 years were really their own kind of hell. Right from the beginning, the investigation had problems. The pond was not immediately treated as a crime scene. And in the newspaper articles, there are all of these pictures, and it's just covered with friends and people showing up to help look for her. But
All
that
good
doesn't
intentions,
preserve the
but
crime scene. Exactly. The instinct, from her family, from the community, from everyone was to come help search. So hundreds of people flooded the beach, the woods, all looking for her, all walking through the area where Molly had last been, trying to find her. And I completely understand that impulse. But it meant that by the time law enforcement locked the scene down and actually started processing it forensically, it had already been compromised beyond anything usable. Hundreds of footprints, hundreds of people moving through potential evidence. It was so contaminated.
so they had lost any evidence before they even knew what they were looking for, basically.
Mm-hmm. That's the reality of it, yeah. And investigators acknowledged that the scene wasn't secured early enough. And that's something that shaped the entire trajectory of this case. The search itself, like I mentioned, was enormous. It became the largest and most expensive missing person search in the history of Massachusetts. They had the state police, local departments, environmental police, canine units, helicopters, dive teams. They searched everywhere, and they searched for weeks. And while that search is happening, the Bish family is living in a nightmare that doesn't end. There's no closure, there's no answers. Molly is just gone. And every day that passed without finding her was another day of not knowing whether Molly was alive or not.
I can't even imagine going through that
I can't either.
or what that does to your family. That is just so awful.
It is. Maggie and John Bish made a decision early on that they were not going to sit and wait. They threw themselves into action. They created the Molly Bish Foundation, which focuses on child safety, creating ID kits for kids, fingerprinting, photographing, building awareness around child abductions. Over the years, they would go on to create identification cards for more than 46,000 children. They pushed for legislation. They worked with lawmakers. They became advocates in a way that fundamentally changed how Massachusetts approached missing children cases. Molly's case is credited with helping bring the Amber Alert system to her state. And at the same time, they were putting Molly's face everywhere. Posters, flyers, buttons, media appearances. Molly was featured on the cover of People magazine. The case was profiled on Unsolved Mysteries. It was on America's Most Wanted, 48 Hours. The Bish family kept her name alive because they had to believe, that someone out there knew something. But months turned into a year, and then 2 years. Tips kept coming in, investigators kept following them, but none of them led to Molly. On August 2nd, 2000, just 5 weeks after she disappeared, that would have been Molly's 17th birthday. By August of 2001, Molly would have turned 18. Instead of a birthday party, the ice cream cake, the piñata, new shoes, which she loved from her dad, the family planned to attend Mass at the same parish where Molly had made her first communion and been confirmed. Maggie Bish, sitting in a living room that had quietly become something almost like a shrine, deflating balloons from a remembrance motorcycle ride, thousands of letters from strangers in baskets, a corner devoted to teddy bears for Molly Bear, buttons reading, "Pray for Molly," and simply hope. Maggie put it this way: you lose your glasses, you lose your keys. How do you lose your child? The family watched these milestones, her 18th birthday, everything she should have been celebrating, come and go. Graduation, going to college, all of it. Just empty space.
And just year after year of that is so heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. And then in late fall of 2002, something happened that no one knew about yet. A hunter was out in the woods on Whiskey Hill in Palmer. Now, Palmer borders Warren. It's about 5 miles from Comins Pond. While he's out there, he notices something in the underbrush. It's a piece of blue fabric. It looks like it could be from a swimming suit. Now, this hunter knew about the Molly Bish case. Everyone in the area did. He remembered hearing that Molly had been wearing an orange bathing suit when she disappeared. So he looked at this blue fabric and thought, that's not connected, and he left it there.
Oh, that's not good. That's too bad.
Yeah, he left it there for months. It wasn't until May of 2003, about 6 months later, that he happened to mention it to a friend. And that friend knew that Molly had been wearing a blue bathing suit, a blue Nike one piece with white lines. That friend called the police immediately.
Oh, 6 months. The fabric was just sitting out there after being found, after 3 years or 2 years at that point. But
Yes, Molly had been missing for almost 3 years by the time it was reported. Law enforcement got that tip and descended on Whiskey Hill. A massive search launched on May 12, 2003. Over 200 searchers walked shoulder to shoulder through that terrain every single day, combing through steep, heavily wooded hillside. This went on for weeks. And then on June 3rd, 2003, they found her. Searchers located human bones on a remote wooded hillside about 500 feet from where the bathing suit had been spotted. They weren't intact remains. They found 26 bones, including her skull, a lock of hair, and a tongue ring. The bones were scattered across a wide area on a steep incline, hidden under leaves and ground cover. The district attorney said that there were gouge marks on the arm bones consistent with animals having dragged them from their original location over the years. They also found pieces of her bathing suit, the blue Nike one piece she'd been wearing. On June 9th, 2003, almost 3 years to the day since Molly vanished, the remains were positively identified as hers through DNA and dental records.
was there a cause of death they were able to find? It doesn't seem very likely.
Yeah, after that long and being in the elements, and
Yeah.
they were not. The extreme decomp and the condition of the remains, a definitive cause of death cannot be determined. They knew she was abducted. They know she was killed, but they don't know how. And investigators have said that they'll probably never know. What they did know as of June 9th was that Molly wasn't missing anymore. She was gone. This was no longer a missing person case. It was now a murder investigation.
How did they know that she was murdered? How did they know she wasn't abducted and ran off and got lost and fell in the woods or something? Like, how did they know she was murdered?
That is a really good question because, like we mentioned, there is no cause of death. Specifically, the bones showed no gunshot wounds, no blunt force trauma, no stab marks, save from a knife attack, nothing that could point to exactly how she died. But like we know, manner of death and cause of death aren't the same thing. Cause is the specific mechanism. Manner is that broader classification. We have 5 options. They are homicide, accident, suicide, natural, and undetermined. That ruling comes from a judgment built from the context, so not just from the autopsy. They looked at a 16-year-old vanishing from her lifeguard post in under 10 minutes. There were the screams heard, everything left behind. She's found about 5 miles away from where she had been, buried in remote woods 3 years later. So they took all of that context and decided it was more than enough for investigators to rule it a homicide, even without ever being able to say precisely how she died. Now, this next part of the case, honestly, is one of the most infuriating things I've ever had to sit with while researching for an episode. Because over 25 years, investigators have looked at multiple men for this crime, men with violent histories, men with ties to the area, men who looked like the composite sketch, and no one has ever been charged. We're going to walk through the 3 primary suspects and pay attention to how strong some of these connections seem on the surface and then how each one falls apart just enough to leave the case exactly where it started.
Sounds really frustrating.
Yeah, it is. Suspect number one was a man named Rodney Stanger. He was from Southbridge, Massachusetts, and Southbridge is right near Warren, close enough that someone living there could easily know the back roads, the ponds, the wooded areas. And Stanger did. He was known to hunt and fish near Comins Pond. He was familiar with the woods around Palmer, including Whiskey Hill area, where Molly's remains were eventually found. He knew that terrain. At the time of Molly's disappearance in 2000, Stanger was living in a fully paid off house in Southbridge. No criminal record, no warrants, just a guy living quietly in the area. But shortly after Molly vanished, shortly after the composite sketch of the man in the white car started circulating, Stanger abruptly moved to Florida.
He just left?
Yep, packed up all of his things and moved to Summerfield, Florida. Now, that probably isn't suspicious on his own, but a friend of his, a man named Michael Philbrook, later told reporters what Stanger had said to him before he left. He said Stanger had told him, "The cops have been after me. These young ones, they won't leave me alone." Philbrook also said, and this is a direct quote, "I think he's just about capable of doing something like that. He has no feelings, no emotions." Now, Stanger didn't own a white sedan, but his brother did. His brother owned a 1985 white Chrysler that matched the description Maggie gave. And that brother hasn't been seen since 2006.
Oh, so his brother went missing. Did his brother live in the area too and then went missing? Okay.
Yep. Stanger managed to stay off the radar for years in Florida. But then in 2008, he murdered his live-in girlfriend, a woman named Crystal Morrison. He stabbed her to death in their trailer home in Summerfield. Stanger was convicted and sentenced to 25 years to life. And that's when things got really interesting. After Crystal's murder, her sister Bonnie came forward and told police something that Crystal had told her before she died. Crystal had made a cryptic phone call to Bonnie, implying that Stanger may have been involved in murders back in Massachusetts. She alluded to Molly Bish and a girl named Holly, who was a 10-year-old girl that was abducted and killed in Sturbridge in 1993.
So his girlfriend told her sister he might be connected to two different murders, and then she ends up being murdered.
Exactly what happened. After Crystal's death, Bonnie traveled to Florida to retrieve her sister's belongings from the trailer where she was killed. While she was there, she found a wallet hidden in a kitchen cabinet. Inside was Stanger's Massachusetts firearms identification card. The photo on that card, renewed just 2 months before Molly's disappearance, bore a striking resemblance to the composite sketch. When Bonnie saw it, she said the photo looked exactly like the rendering of the man Maggie had described. So, Massachusetts State Police traveled to Florida. They searched the trailer. They interviewed Stanger in prison. He denied any involvement in Molly's case. And despite all of that, the proximity to the pond, the familiarity with Whiskey Hill, the abrupt move, murdering his girlfriend, the cryptic warnings, the FID card, Rodney Stanger has never formally been named a suspect. He was a person of interest, but that's it. After they searched his trailer and found nothing definitive, they couldn't do anything else with that, and the case stayed open.
That's really frustrating, but like you said, there's no evidence. How would they even charge him on that? They don't have anything besides some cryptic messages, and the resemblance to the composite.
Right.
But it's so frustrating because really they don't have any evidence,
Right. And you can't build a case without it.
No, you can't. You don't have anything positively linking him to Molly.
And by the time he was on their radar, it's 8 years later. So getting some of those things, phone records aren't the same. Don't have geofencing. I mean, that's a huge issue. In 2011, a private investigator, a former Vermont state trooper named Daniel Malley, brought a name to the Bish family and the police. His name was Gerald Battistoni. Battistoni was a convicted rapist. He had served 10 to 12 years at Cedar Junction State Prison in Walpole. His conviction was for raping his former girlfriend's teenage daughter in the early 1990s. And that's where the connections start stacking up in a way that is really hard to ignore. His rape victim had been living on Comins Pond Road in Warren around the time that Molly disappeared.
Oh, so Comins Pond Road, is that the road that leads to the pond?
Yes, the same road. It gets worse. Heather Bish later said publicly that Battistoni had actually raped a woman in the woods near where Molly's remains were found on Whiskey Hill. He knew that area. He had been there. He had committed a violent crime there. His second wife told investigators that on the day Molly disappeared, he had been working on their car, a white Chevy, and had taken it for a drive through the Warren area, a white car in Warren on June 27th, 2000. She also said he was familiar with the back roads between Ware and Warren because he had used them to buy drugs. He had driven over Whiskey Hill. He knew exactly how to get in and out of that area. And then there's this. A profiler who reviewed the case described Gerald as a sexual sadist. Women who were close to him described deeply disturbing behavior. They also said that he had a fixation with young blonde girls. Also, he bore a really strong resemblance to the composite sketch.
So he's a convicted rapist who knew the exact locations tied to Molly's case. He was driving a white car the day she vanished, and he matched the physical description.
Yeah, all
That's
of that.
pretty.
A lot.
A lot, too.
When newspaper articles in 2011 publicly connected his name to both the Molly Bish and the Holly Puranen case.
The other guy was connected to both as well.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that a couple of times, actually.
Interesting.
When that article came out, Gerald attempted suicide in prison. He survived, but he never spoke about the case. He never confessed. He never provided any information. And on November 11th, 2014, he died in prison at the age of 52 without ever being charged. It's also worth noting DNA from Holly's case was eventually tied to a different suspect, a man named David Bulliot, who died in 2003. So while Battistoni was looked at for both cases, the Holly connection may have actually led elsewhere. But for Molly, it's unclear whether his DNA was ever definitively compared to whatever suspect DNA exists in her case.
Do they have DNA for her case?
They actually do. There's a substantial amount of physical evidence still preserved from the case. Over 260 individual items sitting in evidence bags at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. Things like cigarette butts found near the pond, duct tape, items recovered from suspects' homes over the years. And here's the part that keeps the case alive. Investigators have said they actually do have an unidentified DNA profile from the crime scene. They just haven't been able to match it to anyone yet. So it's not that they're missing DNA, it's that they're sitting on DNA that they can't attach to a name. And that's actually why testing keeps getting redone every few years. Back in 2012, they retested 20 pieces. In 2016, another 24 went out for what they called, quote, enhanced testing. And there was another round announced as recently as 2023. Each time, the idea is the same. As the technology gets better, samples that were too degraded to read a few years ago might actually be usable now. So what we know is that they're not waiting on a single DNA test. They're just waiting on technology to finally catch up to the evidence that they already have. Suspect number 3, and this is the big one, Francis Frank Sumner Sr. On June 3rd, 2021, More than 20 years after Molly disappeared, the Worcester County District Attorney, Joseph Early, did something that had never been done in this case before. He publicly named a person of interest.
Wow. After 21 years, they had never named anyone before?
Never. Not Stanger, not Bat Stoney. I mean, they had said, we're looking at them. There were newspaper articles, but law enforcement had never publicly named anyone officially.
Okay.
And they named Francis Frank P. Sumner Sr. Sumner was born in 1945. He was a longtime Central Massachusetts resident who owned and operated auto body and repair shops in multiple different areas around Massachusetts. He had been active in the area from 1960 until his death in 2016 at age 71. He had a criminal record that was over 20 pages long.
Wow.
In 1982, Sumner was convicted of aggravated rape and kidnapping. He had hired a woman to clean his apartment, locked her inside, choked her, threatened to kill her, and raped her. He served time, he got out, and he went right back to living and working in the community. The DA described the evidence against Sumner as persuasive and credible. Sumner fit the physical description Maggie had given. He resembled the composite sketch. He operated auto body shops in the area. He was known to be mobile, driving between shops, traveling back roads. Heather Bish said a member of Sumner's own family had reached out to her years earlier and given her his name as someone who should be looked at. Heather said, quote, "This person, Frank Sumner, had been convicted of an aggravated rape and kidnapping. He's a bad guy, and he hid amongst us."
Did anything happen with that?
Well, like I said, Sumner had already died in 2016, so investigators couldn't interview him. They couldn't get his DNA directly. What they could do was get familial DNA. So they traveled to an Ohio prison where Sumner's son was serving time for robbery. They obtained his DNA to try to match Frank Sr. to Molly's case. And then the Bish family waited. Heather started a TikTok account, reaching out to followers, asking anyone with information about Sumner to call the tip line. And the family was hopeful. For the first time in 21 years, someone had been named. It felt like momentum. And then the results came back. The DNA was not a match.
After all of that, they still don't have anybody.
Yeah, after 21 years of waiting, the first person ever publicly named, this man with a 20-page criminal record that included the exact things, rape and kidnapping. A man whose own family member pointed investigators towards him, but the DNA didn't connect him. The DA's office has declined to discuss the specifics of the testing. They've said no one has been ruled out. As of 2025, Early still maintains that Sumner is the only named person of interest and calls the evidence persuasive. But at this point, without a DNA match, they can't charge him. There's no case and there's no closure.
I wonder if they could go back and DNA test against
The other two.
Stanger and Gerald.
No closure. And so 25 years after Molly Bish was taken, there are 3 men who each in their own way looked like they could have done this. 2 of them are now dead. 1 is in prison for killing someone else. And none of them have been proven to be the man in the white car.
It's just so awful. There's just no words and so much heartbreak for her family.
So awful for her family. Such a long time.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something else that has hung over the Molly Bish investigation. It starts 7 years before Molly ever set foot at Comins Pond. On August 5th, 1993, a 10-year-old girl named Holly was visiting her grandparents' lakefront summer cottage on South Pond in Sturbridge, Massachusetts. Holly was a bright, blonde-haired kid just out of 4th grade. She loved swimming and fishing and wanted to be a marine biologist when she grew up. That morning, Holly asked her dad, Rick, if she and her 5-year-old brother could walk up the road to a neighbor's house to see a litter of newborn collie puppies. He said, yeah, of course. He told her not to stay long because they were going to lunch soon. A little while later, Zachary came back to the cottage alone, and Holly wasn't with him. One of her sneakers was found on the road, and Holly was gone.
That's so awful. She was only 10 years old.
10 years
And
old.
with her little brother.
Yes, walking to see puppies on a summer morning in this rural area where her family had been coming for years. And someone took her. The search went on for nearly 2 months. And then on October 23rd, 1993, hunters found Holly's remains in a wooded area near Five Bridge Road in Brimfield, Massachusetts. This is about 5 miles from her grandparents' cottage. Because of the advanced decomp, the cause of death could not be definitively determined. They also couldn't determine whether she had been sexually assaulted. Her case has never been solved.
And how is she connected to Molly?
A few different ways. Some individually could be taken as a coincidence, but together they paint a picture that's really hard to walk away from. First, geography. Sturbridge and Warren are neighboring communities. They're in the same stretch of rural central Massachusetts. We're talking about a small pocket of Worcester and Hampton counties where 2 young girls, both blonde, both taken on a summer morning, both from public, seemingly safe locations, were abducted and later found deceased in wooded areas a few miles from where they disappeared. The landscape is the same. The terrain is the same. The type of crime is the same. And second, the suspects overlap. Every major person of interest in Molly's case was also looked at in connection with Holly's case. Rodney Stanger lived in Southbridge, which is adjacent to Sturbridge. Crystal Morrison, the girlfriend that he later murdered, told her sister before she died that she thought Stanger had been involved in murders in Massachusetts, specifically referencing both Molly and Holly. Gerald had ties to Sturbridge through his former girlfriend, who was a realtor showing homes near Holly's grandparents' cottage. Investigators believed he may have been in the area looking for his rape victim or her mother around the time that Holly disappeared.
So the same names just keep coming up in both cases, it looks like.
Over and over. Now, it's important to say that in Holly's case, forensic evidence was eventually linked to a different man, a former Springfield resident named David, who died in 2003. So Holly's case may ultimately lead somewhere separate from Molly's, but Holly's case is still unsolved, and that link was made 23 years ago now.
Did you say Holly's case was still unsolved?
Yeah, both cases. Even though they have that DNA match, I don't know why it's not enough to charge him. Yeah. There's a third connection, and this one is the thing I haven't been able to stop thinking about since I heard about Molly's case way back when. After Holly was abducted and killed in 1993, the case was all over the news. It devastated the community, and a 10-year-old girl in nearby Warren sat down and wrote a letter to Holly's family. That girl was Molly Bish.
Oh.
Molly was the same age as Holly when Holly was taken. So Molly wrote to Holly's family, and the letter said, quote, "I am very sorry. I wish I could make it up to you. Holly is a very pretty girl. She's almost as tall as me. I wish I knew Holly. I hope they found her." She was 10 years old when she wrote that. And 7 years later, she was taken from a pond just miles away from where Holly was taken. And her remains were found in the same county as Holly's, in the same kind of wooded, remote terrain, under the same kind of circumstances. It's just heartbreaking. This little girl wrote this letter of compassion to this child's family, and then it happens to her.
Situation happened to her.
Yeah.
I don't have words for that either.
Yeah. I don't really think there's anything to say. I think you just sit with it, because that's what the families have been doing, both of them, for so many years, sitting with a grief that has no resolution in a part of Massachusetts where 2 girls were taken and no one has ever been held accountable for either one. Investigators have never confirmed a definitive link between the 2 cases. As of 2025, no evidence has been publicly revealed, proving that the same person killed both Holly and then Molly, but no one has been ruled out either. And in the minds of the family and in the minds of a lot of people who have followed these cases closely, the question has never gone away. What if it was the same person? And what if he's already dead and we'll never know for sure?
Or did they look into the guy who was connected to Holly's case? Did they look at him at all for Molly's case or no?
I believe that they did. They never announced it publicly and they never linked him to Molly's case. But I don't think that you could ignore that connection.
Yeah.
So here's where we are, nearly 26 years out. And let's talk about what unsolved actually looks like when you walk through it. There are 267 pieces of physical evidence from this case sitting in bags on shelves at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab in Sudbury. 267. These are items collected from Comins Pond, from the woods on Whiskey Hill, from the area where Molly's remains were found, cigarette butts from the pond, pieces of clothing, items recovered during the search. Some of those pieces have been tested. Some were sent to labs in Texas and Massachusetts for analysis over the years. And some of them sat untested for over a decade because the technology didn't exist yet to process them. Heather has said publicly that unidentified DNA has been found at the crime scene. In 2023, the DA's office announced that additional DNA testing was underway, but they didn't give any specifics. No results have been made public. As of 2025, investigators have said they're continuing to use advances in forensic science, including familial DNA and enhanced testing methods, to try to re-examine evidence that was once considered unusable.
So they are saying they have DNA, but they just can't match it to anyone.
That's what Heather has indicated, yes. There is DNA in the case. The question is whether it belongs to the killer and whether it can ever be matched. The frustrating reality is that every major suspect that they've looked at has either passed or has not been connected through DNA. And then there's the physical evidence that surfaced after the remains were found. In 2014, a private investigator working for the Bish family went back to the woods in Palmer, back to the area near where Holly's remains had been discovered in 2003. And he found something. A paper bag partially buried under a log. Inside were plaid boxer shorts and some pink clothing material, similar to the plaid boxers and pink tank top that Molly was wearing the day she disappeared.
It was found 11 years later.
11 years after her remains were found, 14
Wow.
years after going missing.
Yeah.
And Heather Bish said something about the discovery that is chilling. She said she believes someone, possibly the killer, brought that bag back to the scene after Molly's remains were found in 2003. That whoever did this returned to the place where they had left her.
They were going back to visit after they found out she had been found.
That's the theory. I could also see, now that she's gone, not wanting to have that in your house or wherever you had stored that and thinking, I can leave it there. They've already checked there.
Yeah.
If they're saying that the bag wasn't there the entire time, but was buried much more recently, closer to when it was found in 2014, that could mean the person was still alive and still in the area, which does narrow some things and opens up others in a way that's really unsettling. There were also efforts to find the white car. Based on tips the family and their private investigator received, there was a belief that a car matching the one Maggie described had been hidden somewhere, in a garage, in a barn, or buried. In 2017, investigators used ground-penetrating radar to search a closed campground in West Brookfield, but they didn't find anything.
So at this point, is the family still working with the DA?
This is where it gets painful, and it really shows what 25 years of an unsolved case does, not just emotionally, but in terms of the relationship between the victim's family and the people who are supposed to be finding their answers. The Bish family has publicly expressed frustration with the Worcester County District Attorney's Office and the Massachusetts State Police. They've pointed to a series of problems that have plagued this investigation from the very beginning. The crime scene not being preserved, early tunnel vision on Molly's boyfriend, lost samples, Frank Sumner's DNA not being in the system despite his lengthy criminal record, and what the family describes as a lack of communication, not being told what's being tested, not being told what the results are, not being kept in the loop on the investigation into their own daughter's murder. By 2025, the Bish family was asking for a new team to take over the case entirely. They, at that point, had lost faith that the current office could solve it. Molly's father, John, once said, and I think this captures everything about how this family has carried this. He said, "Don't you dare call this a cold case, because a cold case means there's a folder somewhere on a shelf. This is not a folder on a shelf."
And that's a father who's never stopped fighting for his daughter.
Exactly. Their whole family has never stopped fighting. And I think what's remarkable about this family is that they didn't just fight for Molly, they fought for every kid. We talked about the Molly Bish Foundation creating those identification kits. They worked with lawmakers to get that Amber Alert system in Massachusetts. Molly's case is directly credited with changing how the state approaches missing children cases. They also founded the Molly Bish Center at Anna Maria College, which works to improve missing person investigations and raise awareness. And Heather, Molly's older sister, who was in college when Molly was taken, Heather has become the family voice. She started a TikTok account in 2021, sharing Molly's story with a new generation of people who were too young to remember when it happened. She's posted videos saying things like, "It's been 7,680 days since my sister disappeared, and I've been waiting for answers on what happened to her. If you know something, please say something. The wait needs to be over." Heather said at the 25th anniversary vigil, "I feel her beside me. Because of Molly, I've become braver than I ever thought possible. I have faced my deepest fears, and I have endured unimaginable heartbreak. I have survived." And Maggie, 25 years later, Maggie, the mother who saw that man in the car, Maggie said, "You can't give up, because we promised Molly we'd never forget her and we'd never let her down." And that is where this case sits. 25 years, 6,700 tips. We've got all the evidence. We've got the 3 suspects, unidentified DNA, unanswered questions, and a family that has turned the worst thing that ever happened to them into a mission that has literally saved children's lives. But they still don't have the one thing they've been asking for since June 27th, 2000. They still don't know who took Molly from that pond. And I keep coming back to that parking lot, a mother's instinct that something was wrong, a man in a white car who didn't appear to belong there, and a 16-year-old girl who walked toward the water on a summer morning and never came home. If you have any information about the murder of Molly Bish, the tip line is still active. You can call the Massachusetts State Police at 508-453-7575 or 1-855-MA-SOLVE. You can also email tips, and they can be anonymous, and we'll post all of that in the show notes.
Yes. As we always say, someone's got to know something. So.
Yeah. Even something small. We say it all the time. Even if you think it doesn't matter, let them decide if it matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Molly's family has been waiting long enough. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Crime Clueless. If you're looking for the resources that we used in this episode, head over to our blog. You can find it on crimeclueless.com, and we'll also post it in the show notes. We would love to connect with you on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Just search for @CrimeClueless. We'd love to hear from you, any theories, feedback, or case suggestions. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd be grateful if you take a moment to rate, review, and/or share our podcast. Your support helps us, and we're grateful for every single rating and review. You can find Crime Clueless anywhere you listen to podcasts. And as always, remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murderers.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.